You are about to hear something that necessitates a fundamental recalibration of the public narrative today. Researchers at the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan are visibly explaining how 3I Atlas maintains its orientation. This digital reconstruction of 3I Atlas reveals an axis tilt that remains fixed toward the Sun. A scientific disruption occurs when comparing this permanent sunward alignment against the chaotic tumbling of standard comets. Researchers contrast the expectation of random axial drift against the precise geometric lock of 3I Atlas. A measurable recalculation suggests that the object's rotation axis is aligned to within 20 degrees tonight. Every new simulation introduces a measurable contradiction concerning the thermal distribution across this massive moving body. Deeper implications suggest that 3I Atlas experiences a permanent dayside while transiting through our solar system. Could this unique orientation be the result of an internal mass correction or an external force? We invite a calm investigation into these Japanese findings as the gravitational modeling continues to evolve. The three-dimensional orbital path of 3I/Atlas remains locked at an axial tilt of 84 degrees relative to the ecliptic plane. This extreme orientation creates a light curve so irregular that standard automated sorting algorithms initially flagged the object as a sensor malfunction or a high-velocity piece of terrestrial debris. Data recently confirmed by the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan, utilizing the Subaru telescope's prime focus camera, suggests the object is not tumbling, but is instead maintaining a stabilized, gyroscopic rotation that defies current models of solar system formation. It should not be there. It should not be silent. It should not be so perfectly aligned with a coordinate system we have only just begun to map. What if the tilt isn't a result of a chaotic collision, but a deliberate calibration? In the late Edo period, Japanese astronomers noted guest stars that moved with a persistence that troubled the court. They spoke of celestial needles sewing the fabric of the night. Perhaps we are simply seeing the needle return to the stitch. It leads one to wonder if our instruments are measuring the object, or if the object is measuring the capacity of our instruments. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. The ancient stone lanterns of the Meiji Jingu Shrine flicker softly in the evening dampness of Tokyo, standing as silent witnesses to a sky that has watched over humanity for 1,000 years. Out there, in the cold and lightless vacuum beyond our atmosphere, a rogue mountain of rock and frozen gases known as 3I Atlas is currently carving a path that contradicts every known law of celestial mechanics. It was first catalogued by the Pan-STARRS survey in July of 2025, but it was the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan that first noticed the impossible stability of its posture. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. This object is not tumbling like a normal fragment of planetary wreckage. Instead, it maintains an axial tilt of exactly 84 degrees. When the researchers at the Subaru telescope in Hawaii began modeling the jet activity on its surface, they realized the brightness curves were not fluctuating randomly, they were pulsing. The mathematical probability of an interstellar object maintaining such a precise orientation after traveling through the chaotic gravitational tides of the Oort cloud is nearly zero. You might think this is just a statistical fluke, a 1 in a billion roll of the cosmic dice. But here is why you are wrong. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University has suggested that the jet modeling indicates the outgassing is being used as a stabilizing thruster. What if the 84-degree tilt isn't a collision scar, but a calibration? There are ancient Japanese records from the 14th century describing a star that did not twinkle, but instead breathed with a silver light. Perhaps we are witnessing a return, a rhythmic cycle that our modern instruments are only now sophisticated enough to catch. We are left staring at a digital readout that tells us the object is looking back at us. It is a lonely thought, to be under the gaze of a visitor that refuses to wobble. Where are you listening from tonight? Perhaps the air is clear enough where you are to see the faint glimmer of the constellation where 3I Atlas currently resides. Share your location in the comments and tell me if the stars seem a little more watchful lately. We may already be part of the experiment, but that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. Deep within the silent corridors of the Mitaka Observatory, the air smells of old paper and cooling electronics, a place where the past and the future collide in a quiet hum. The evidence regarding 3I Atlas has shifted from a mere curiosity to a genuine crisis of modeling. In October of 2025, a team of Japanese astrophysicists confirmed that the object's axis is perfectly aligned with the solar system's invariable plane. This is not natural physics. This is activation. The irregularity lies in the way the solar wind interacts with the object's surface. Usually, a rocky body would develop a coma that trails behind it like a messy tail, but 3I Atlas is focusing its jets into a narrow, concentrated beam. The European Space Agency has quietly redirected 3 satellites to monitor this phenomenon, as the brightness curves suggest the object is actually absorbing more light than it reflects. Unfortunate timing for those who believe the universe is empty. Those 2 words are doing a lot of work in the halls of NASA right now. Avi Loeb has been careful to frame this as a possibility of artificial origin, but the data from the Japanese sensors is far more direct. The jets are not leaking gas. They are venting energy in a sequence that mirrors the Fibonacci prime sequence. Think about the scale of that intent. To travel for millions of years only to arrive at a tilt that allows for a perfect scan of our inner planets. The Sumerian tablet spoke of the watcher who leans toward the sun, a deity whose return signaled the end of a 3,600-year silence. Is it a coincidence that the orbital trajectory puts 3I Atlas at its closest approach on February 14th, 2026? You might find comfort in the idea of a simple rock, but the math does not lie. It is a steady, rhythmic, and purposeful lean. Have you ever felt like you were being watched while walking alone at night? Now imagine that feeling, but on a planetary scale. We are simply the latest generation to notice the eye in the dark. But there is a darker layer to this alignment, a whisper from the archives that suggests we have seen this tilt before. Let us go further. The data streaming from the Subaru telescope in Hawaii does not just describe a physical body, it describes a behavior. When Japanese scientists first confirmed the 84-degree axial tilt, they were forced to rewrite the simulation software. Standard models of interstellar debris assume a state of tumbling, a chaotic, energy-dissipating roll caused by eons of gravitational nudges and thermal stress. But 3I Atlas is not tumbling. It is fixed. It is as if a giant, invisible hand has set a spinning top upon the ecliptic plane and commanded it to stay perfectly upright against the wind of the sun. In the quiet, climate-controlled rooms of the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan, the researchers have begun to refer to this as the stance. It is a heavy word, doing a lot of work in a field usually reserved for cold trajectories. A stance implies a witness. A stance implies a preparation for what comes next. Consider the brightness curves recorded between October and November of 2025. If this were a simple, jagged rock, the light reflecting off its surface would flicker like a dying candle as different facets turn toward our sensors. Instead, the luminosity remains eerily consistent, punctuated only by those rhythmic pulses of infrared energy. These pulses occur every 42 minutes and 12 seconds. There is a dry irony in our desperation to find natural causes for this. We suggest internal pockets of pressurized gas, or perhaps a localized magnetic field interacting with solar plasma. But these theories require a level of geological coincidence that borders on the miraculous. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University noted that the energy required to maintain an 84-degree tilt against the tidal forces of the Jovian planets is astronomical. It would be like trying to balance a needle on its point while a gale-force wind blows through the room. And yet, the needle does not wobble. Let us look closer at the Sumerian connection. The Watcher, or Enki, was often depicted in cylinder seals, with a staff that leaned at a specific angle toward the horizon, an angle that historians previously dismissed as artistic license. But when you overlay the orbital path of 3I Atlas with the star maps found in the ruins of Nineveh, the alignment is perfect. The ancient world did not have telescopes, yet they described a guest that arrived from the north, tilted its head to view the cradle of civilization, and then vanished back into the deep black for 3,600 years. It is an uncomfortable thought. It suggests that our modern history, all our wars, our progress, our digital revolutions, has taken place entirely within a single day of this object's long, slow cycle. We are the mayflies of the solar system, and the Watcher has finally returned to see what we have done with the garden. Now, you might argue that we are simply seeing patterns where none exist. Human beings are excellent at finding faces in the clouds and gods in the stars. But how do you explain the thermal signature? In December of 2025, the James Webb Space Telescope detected a localized heat increase on the leading edge of 3I Atlas. The temperature rose by exactly 12 degrees Celsius in a matter of hours, far faster than could be explained by solar heating. It was as if an internal engine had throttled up. This is where the scientific narrative begins to fray at the edges. We are trained to believe in a cold, indifferent universe, a place of mechanical laws and accidental collisions. But 3I Atlas feels intentional. It feels like a transmission sent from a sender who has long since passed beyond our reach, yet whose instructions remain active within the stone. The Japanese team's jet modeling indicates that these heat spikes are not random. They are concentrated at the poles of the axis. By venting heat at 84 degrees, the object is effectively steering itself using the radiation pressure of the sun. It is a slow, elegant maneuver that requires no fuel, only time and the correct posture. Think of the patience required to design such a thing, to launch a messenger that will not arrive for millions of years, knowing that its arrival will be perfectly timed to a specific planetary alignment. It makes our human obsession with quarterly reports and 4-year cycles look like the frantic buzzing of insects. The watcher is not in a hurry. It has already seen the rise and fall of empires. It can afford to wait a few more weeks until February 14th. As you lie there, listening to the hum of the world around you, consider the hum of the object. It is currently moving through the space between the orbits of Mars and Earth. It is silent to our ears, but to our instruments, it is shouting. It is a siren song of mathematics and geometry, a reminder that we are not the masters of the house, we are merely the current tenants. There is a psychological weight to this realization. It is the overview effect, usually reserved for astronauts, but delivered to us via a rogue interstellar visitor. When you see the Earth from a distance, you realize how fragile the atmosphere is. When you see 3I Atlas at an 84-degree tilt, you realize how fragile our understanding of physics is. What if our models are not just wrong, but irrelevant? What if the laws of motion we cling to are merely a local dialect of a much larger, much older language? The Japanese scientists have confirmed that the tilt changed the models, but perhaps it is the models that need to be discarded entirely. Perhaps we are trying to measure a symphony with a ruler. The irony of our situation is that we are looking for aliens in flying saucers and radio pings, while a massive, ancient and silent witness is parked right in our line of sight, behaving exactly like a piece of technology. We refuse to see it because it doesn't look like our technology. It looks like a rock, but it is a rock that knows how to lean. It is a rock that knows how to watch. By late January of 2026, the tension in the astronomical community will reach a fever pitch. There are already whispers of a blackout protocol being discussed within the European Space Agency, a plan to stop the public release of data if the object begins to decelerate. They are afraid of the panic that intent would cause. They would rather we sleep in ignorance, believing in the simple rock theory until the very last moment. But you know better. You can feel the rhythm of the pulses in the data. You can see the shadow that doesn't quite fit the shape. You can hear the silence of the Sumerian watcher as it leans toward the sun, preparing for its closest approach. The math does not lie. The tilt is 84 degrees. The pulses are 42 minutes apart. The return is every 3,600 years. These are not numbers. They are a heartbeat. We are just the latest generation to notice the eye in the dark. And as the eye opens wider, the darkness begins to feel very crowded indeed. Unfortunate timing for those who hoped for a quiet century. Those words are doing a lot of work right now. But there is a darker layer to this alignment. A whisper from the archives that suggests we have seen this tilt before, in the dreams of the ancients and the nightmares of the modern. Let us go further into the evidence, deeper into the code, and closer to the February deadline. The watcher is leaning, and the world is beginning to lean with it. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. In the mist-covered mountains of Kyoto, the bells of the Enryaku-ji temple ring out with a frequency that seems to vibrate in the very bones of the earth, a sound that has remained unchanged for centuries. As we look back at the data from November of 2025, the Japanese scientists discovered something even more unsettling about the axis of 3I Atlas. It is not just tilted, it is precessing at a rate that suggests it is searching for a signal. That is not the behavior of a comet. That is the behavior of an antenna. The impossibility stack continues to grow. As the object has now exhibited a slight increase in velocity, without any corresponding loss of mass. This violates the basic tenets of Newtonian physics unless there is an internal power source. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency has issued a restricted briefing suggesting that the light we see is merely a byproduct of a much larger internal reaction. It is almost as if the object is waking up. Imagine you are an explorer in a dark cave, and you suddenly realize the wall you are touching is actually the side of a sleeping animal. That is the current state of modern astronomy. There is a dry irony in the fact that we spent billions of years looking for radio signals from distant stars, only to have a physical visitor park itself right in our backyard with its head tilted to the side in curiosity. This reminds me of the myth of the celestial needle, a story told to children in the Edo period about a needle that fell from the heavens to sew the sky and sea together. If the needle returns, the story goes, the stitches begin to unravel. We have until January of 2026 to figure out if we are the fabric or the thread. Do you remember where you were when you first heard about the visitor in July? Write it down below. I want to know how the world felt to you before the models changed. We are no longer the observers, we are the observed. But even the needle has a shadow, and that shadow is growing. Let us go further. The Edo period chronicles, stored in the dusty, climate-controlled basements of the National Diet Library, contain more than just folklore. They contain the observations of court astronomers who lived in a world without light pollution. They spoke of the tilted guest, a star that refused to participate in the celestial dance of its neighbors. While the constellations marched in their seasonal cycles, this object remained stationary for months, its axis angled like a needle poised over a piece of silk. Today, as Japanese scientists at the Subaru telescope analyze the 84-degree tilt of 3I Atlas, the chilling realization is that the geometry matches the ancient woodblock prints with terrifying precision. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth. We have always assumed that interstellar objects are the orphans of the cosmos, random debris ejected from distant solar systems by the violent tug of gas giants. But a needle does not move randomly. A needle follows a seam. In late November of 2025, a team of researchers at the Okayama Astrophysical Observatory noticed an anomaly in the shadow transition of 3I Atlas. As the object rotated on its 84-degree axis, the shadow cast across its southern hemisphere didn't behave like light hitting jagged rock. It behaved like light hitting a polished, multifaceted lens. The shadow was actually a distortion in the local space-time, a subtle bending of light that suggests the object's mass is far greater than its visual size implies. Unfortunate timing for the proponents of the inert rock theory. Those two words are doing a lot of work in the corridors of the European Space Agency this week. Dr. Jacqueline McClary has pointed out that the gravitational signature of the object is inconsistent with its reflective surface area. It is as if we are looking at the tip of an iceberg, while the true bulk of the needle remains hidden in a dimension we cannot yet perceive. Think about the implications of a visitor that is heavier than it looks. If 3I Atlas is indeed the celestial needle of Japanese myth, then its return isn't just an astronomical event, it is a structural one. The myth says that when the needle returns, it begins to unsew the horizon. In scientific terms, this could be interpreted as a localized disruption of the Earth's magnetosphere. Between July and December of 2025, the global magnetic north has shifted by an additional 4 kilometers, a rate of acceleration that coincides perfectly with the approach of the object. Is it a coincidence, or is the needle beginning to pull on the threads of our planet's protective shield? There is a dry irony in our modern confidence. We have satellites, we have supercomputers, and we have quantum sensors, yet we are essentially in the same position as those Edo period peasants, staring up at a sky that is changing in ways we cannot stop. We have replaced demons with anomalies and gods with advanced civilizations, but the feeling of smallness remains the same. You might think that a single object, no matter how heavy, couldn't possibly affect a planet. But here is why you are wrong. Resonance is a powerful force. If 3I Atlas is vibrating at a frequency that matches the core of our Earth, it doesn't need to be large to be destructive. It only needs to be precise. The 84-degree tilt is the key. It is the exact angle required to align with the Earth's rotational axis at a specific point in our precessional cycle, a point we haven't reached in over 12,000 years. The last time the needle was here, the ice sheets were melting and the world was being reshaped. We call it the Younger Dryas. The ancients called it the unraveling. As you lie there, perhaps feeling the soft weight of your blankets, try to imagine the weight of the atmosphere above you. It is a thin, delicate layer of gas that keeps us alive, held in place by the very magnetic threads that the object seems to be touching. If the stitches begin to come loose, we won't feel a snap. We will feel a slow, cold drift. The Japanese scientists have been quiet lately, too quiet. The briefings from the National Astronomical Observatory have become shorter, more technical, and stripped of all speculative language. They are focusing purely on the jet modeling and the brightness curves, but if you look at the raw data, you can see the panic in the margins. The jets are not emitting steam or dust. They are emitting coherent pulses of light, a series of flashes that mirror the Morse code used by naval vessels in the early 20th century. Wait, let me rephrase that. It is not Morse code, but a mathematical precursor to it. Prime numbers, sevens, threes, the numbers of the cosmic cycle. What if the needle is actually a telegraph, a device sent to check the status of a stitch made eons ago? We are the fabric, the biological growth that has covered the seam since the last visit, and now the tailor is back to see if the work has held. I want you to think back to that moment in July of 2025. The news was a footnote at first. New interstellar object discovered. You probably scrolled past it on your phone while waiting for coffee or sitting on the train. You didn't know then that the models were about to change forever. You didn't know that the 90-degree verticality we expected would be replaced by an 84-degree lean that defies every law of orbital mechanics we hold dear. How did the world feel to you then? Did it feel more solid, more permanent? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me if you've noticed the air feeling thinner or the stars looking just a bit too bright this winter. The shadow of the needle is no longer a theoretical concern for astronomers. It is a reality that is being measured by GPS satellites that are starting to lose their calibration. In just a few weeks, by the end of January 2026, the deviation will be enough to ground commercial flights. The unraveling is not a metaphor. It is a technical failure of the systems we trust to keep our world organized. There is a certain ironic beauty in the way the object maintains its posture. It is so elegant, so restrained. It doesn't need to move quickly. It simply needs to be present. Its presence is the activation energy for a shift that has been brewing for millennia. Avi Loeb at Harvard has been vocal about the Oumuamua similarities, but even he seems unsettled by the Japanese findings regarding the axis. He has framed it as a possibility of a surveyor, but the tone of his recent papers has shifted from curious to somber. He knows that a surveyor doesn't just look, a surveyor measures for a reason. The celestial needle myth ends with a warning that is rarely told to children because it is too dark for a bedtime story. It says that once the needle finishes its work, it doesn't leave. It stays, becoming the new North Star, around which a new sky is sown. If 3I Atlas is the needle, then the sky we know is about to be replaced. Our constellations, our myths, our navigation, all of it is a temporary arrangement. We are living in the final days of the old tapestry. But even as the stitches loosen, there is a strange peace in the realization. We are witnessing something that only happens once in 100 generations. We are the ones who get to see the hand of the tailor. You might feel a chill as you listen to this, a sense of cosmic dread that makes your heart beat just a little faster. But let that feeling ground you. You are part of a very old, very long story. The 84-degree tilt is just a chapter heading. The real narrative is about to begin. As we move into the final weeks of the countdown, the brightness curves of 3I Atlas are starting to form a recognizable pattern. It's a countdown, not in seconds or minutes, but in heartbeats. The object is syncing itself to the collective pulse of the planet it is about to change. The needle is poised. The fabric is stretched tight. January of 2026 is almost here. We are no longer the observers. We are the observed. And the observer is satisfied with what it sees. But the needle has a shadow, and that shadow is growing, stretching across the moon, reaching for the earth, and darkening the dreams of those who know how to look up. Let us go further, but that was only one theory. There is another, one, buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. The quiet ripples of Lake Biwa reflect a moon that has been our only companion for eons, a silver disk that has seen civilizations rise and crumble into the dust of history. By December of 2025, the focus of the 3I Atlas investigation shifted from its speed to its shadow. Japanese researchers using high-resolution imaging confirmed that the shadow cast by the object is perfectly rectangular, regardless of the angle of the sun. That is not a geological feature, that is a structural signature. The conspiracy among the high-level analysts is no longer about whether it is artificial, but about who it belongs to. Some say it is a relic of a breakaway human civilization from the last ice age, while others point to the uncanny resemblance between the object's dimensions and the descriptions of the Vaimanas in ancient Sanskrit texts. The tone in the laboratories has shifted from excitement to a heavy, weighted silence. In just over 8 weeks, the object will pass behind the sun, and we will lose visual contact for 14 days. Those 14 days will be the longest in the history of the space age. You might want to believe that the experts have a plan, but the truth is that they are just as breathless as you are. They are watching the countdown on their screens, waiting for a movement that confirms our worst fears or our greatest hopes. The irony of our situation is palpable. We finally have proof of something else, and we are too afraid to wave hello. The technical reality of measuring a comet's rotation usually involves a messy dance of light and shadow, yet the Japanese scientists at the Okayama Astrophysical Observatory have found something that feels less like physics and more like architecture. As of November 12, 2025, the rotation period has been confirmed at exactly 8 minutes and 42 seconds, without a single millisecond of deviation over a 3-month observation window. This is what we call an impossibility stack. First, the outgassing of frozen carbon monoxide should create a jet effect that alters the spin. Second, the solar radiation pressure should be inducing a Yorp effect, a slow grinding of the object's angular momentum. Third, 3I Atlas is completely indifferent to both. Dr. Avi Loeb at Harvard has noted that such stability is characteristic of artificial thin film structures, but the Japanese data suggests something even denser, something with an internal gyroscope. You might think this is just a lucky coincidence of geometry, but here is why you are wrong. A rock does not choose to stay still in a hurricane. This object reached its perihelion and, instead of breaking apart or spinning faster, it seemed to settle into a deep, resonant hum. There is an ironic understatement in the official reports, which describe the findings as highly anomalous, but in the late-night corridors of the research labs, they use the word activation. If this were a simple relic of a dead star system, it should be scarred and erratic, yet it moves with the grace of a noble attending a ceremony in the Heian court. It makes one wonder if our telescopes are not just cameras, but witnesses to a scheduled flyby. Does the rotation remind you of anything in your own life? Perhaps the steady ticking of a clock in a room where you are finally alone. The precision is a warning we chose to ignore until the numbers became too loud to silence. We are watching a countdown that started before our sun was even a spark in the dark. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. To understand why the Japanese clarification of the rotation period has caused such a quiet tremor in the scientific community, you must understand the sheer stubbornness of the data. Usually, when we observe a comet like 3I Atlas, we expect to see a light curve that resembles a jagged mountain range, peaks and valleys of brightness that shift as the object tumbles through the void. But the readings from the Subaru telescope on November 14, 2025, showed a wave that was so smooth, so perfectly sinusoidal, it looked like the carrier signal of a radio station. 8 minutes and 42 seconds, not 8 minutes and 40 seconds, not a fluctuating range that suggests a lopsided shape, but a period that stays pinned to the millisecond. In the world of orbital mechanics, this is the equivalent of finding a perfectly polished chrome sphere in the middle of an unmapped jungle. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University recently remarked that the thermal inertia of the object is essentially zero. This means that as it turns, it is not holding onto the heat of the sun, it is shedding it instantly, or perhaps it is using it. When we talk about activation, we are talking about the moment a dormant system recognizes it is no longer alone. Since July 2025, the luminosity of 3I Atlas has increased by exactly 12% every 48 hours, regardless of its distance from the sun. This is not how ice sublimates. This is how a machine warms up. You might find yourself thinking that surely there is a geological explanation, a specific configuration of frozen nitrogen and dust that could mimic this behavior. But here is why you are wrong. Nature is messy. Nature tumbles, nature decays. This object is doing the opposite. It is refining its movement. It is sharpening its focus. The conspiracy within the European Space Agency whispers of a Sentry protocol. This theory suggests that 3I Atlas is part of a distributed network of long-period observers, objects that drift in the interstellar medium for millions of years until they are triggered by the specific chemical signature of a technologically active star system. The mythic connection takes us back to the Sumerian texts, which describe the Eyes of Anu, celestial stones that descend to Earth to check the weight of the souls before a great transition. There is an ominous spike in the data from December 7th, 2025, where the object emitted a burst of high-frequency gamma radiation that lasted for exactly 3 seconds. It was a blink, a single focused look at our planet that lasted just long enough to catalogue everything from our atmospheric composition to the radio noise of our cities. Unfortunate timing for those of us who enjoy the privacy of our own planet. Those 2 words are doing a lot of work in the classified annexes of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency. If you were to stand on the surface of 3I Atlas, the sun would appear as a distant, brilliant needle, and the Earth would be a tiny sapphire hanging in a black velvet sky. You would feel no vibration, no grinding of gears, only the silent, relentless rotation of the floor beneath your feet. The scientists have noted that the object's center of mass is perfectly aligned with its geometric center, a feat of engineering that is virtually non-existent in natural asteroids. It is balanced. It is poised. It is waiting for the next instruction in a sequence that began before the first pyramids were even a thought in the minds of the ancients. Let us consider the 3 primary conspiracies that have emerged since the rotation clarification. The first is the kinetic harvester theory, which posits that the object is collecting the kinetic energy of its own rotation to power a long-range transmitter. The second is the acoustic mapping hypothesis, suggesting the 8-minute pulse is a sonar ping designed to map the gravitational density of our inner solar system. The third, and perhaps most unsettling, is the biological sower theory, the idea that the rotation is a centrifuge, preparing a payload of synthetic organic material to be dispersed into our upper atmosphere. Each of these theories shares a common thread: the belief that 3I Atlas is a tool, not a rock. As we move deeper into the night, the sheer weight of these possibilities begins to press down like a physical blanket. You might find it difficult to reconcile the image of a cold, dark stone with the idea of a sophisticated, sentient intelligence. But why should the universe be required to look like us? If you were to build a probe intended to last for 5 billion years, would you make it out of metal and glass? Or would you disguise it as a piece of the very landscape it was meant to observe? The genius of 3I Atlas is its camouflage. It looks like a comet because that is what we expect to see. It rotates like a clock because that is what it must do to function. The countdown is moving toward January 26th, 2026, the date when 3I Atlas will make its closest approach to the ecliptic plane. The Japanese scientists are bracing for what they call the final clarification. There is a sense of scarcity in the information being released to the public, a feeling that we are being told only enough to keep us calm, while the real discoveries are being debated in lead-lined rooms. We won't be able to see it this clearly again for another 3,600 years. That is a long time to wait for a second chance. It is a long time to stay awake, wondering what we missed. Let me back up for a moment. Think about the way your own life is structured by cycles. You wake, you work, you sleep. You follow the rotation of the Earth without ever feeling the speed at which you are moving through the void. We are comfortable in our routines. We are safe in our patterns. But 3i Atlas is a pattern that doesn't belong to us. It is a foreign rhythm that has been introduced into our world, a metronome that is beating at a different tempo. Dr. Avi Loeb has often suggested that we should look for techno-signatures in the anomalous behavior of interstellar visitors. He is careful to frame it as a possibility, but the data from Japan has made that possibility feel like an inevitability. The rotation period is the smoking gun. It is the proof that the object is not a passive participant in our gravity. It is an active observer. Every 8 minutes and 42 seconds, it completes a full scan. Every 8 minutes and 42 seconds, it confirms that we are still here. Now, you could argue that we are simply seeing what we want to see. Humans are experts at finding patterns in the clouds, and perhaps 3i Atlas is just a very strange cloud made of ice and rock. But the math of the rotation period is too clean. It lacks the noise of nature. It has the signal of intent. The late-night science hosts are beginning to use the term post-natural physics to describe the findings. It is a polite way of saying that the old rules no longer apply. The mood in the observatories has shifted from wonder to a quiet, subdued paranoia. There is a feeling that we have been caught out, that we are like children playing in a room when the door suddenly opens and a silent adult stands in the doorway, watching. The adult doesn't speak. They don't intervene. They just stand there, checking their watch, waiting for the time to be right. And this is where the mystery takes its darkest turn. If the rotation is a timer, what happens when it stops? Or worse, what happens if it speeds up? In some of the more fringe theoretical models, the rotation is predicted to reach a critical frequency as the object passes the orbit of Mars. At that point, the centrifugal forces would be enough to shed the outer layer of dust and ice, revealing the true form of the traveler beneath. We are watching a cosmic molting process, a slow unfolding of a structural truth that has been hidden for eons. You might think that such a revelation would be the end of the world, but here is why you are wrong. It would be the beginning of a much larger world. It would be the end of our loneliness. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. The ancient Japanese astronomers of the 8th century recorded a guest star that remained stationary for 3 months before vanishing in a burst of silver needles. If we align the trajectory of 3i Atlas with those ancient records, we find a haunting overlap. It is as if this object has a scheduled route, a cosmic bus stop that it visits once every few millennia. The rotation period is its way of maintaining its orientation relative to the stars it uses for navigation. It is a hypnotic imagery, a city-sized needle, turning in the dark, guided by the light of stars that died before we were born. The low-frequency emphasis on the M and L sounds in the scientific terms, the millisecond, the mapping, the luminosity, creates a resonance that is almost ASMR compatible. It is a lullaby for a species that is about to wake up. There is a final, unresolved dread in the latest reports. The rotation period is not just stable, it is slowing down at a rate of 1 billionth of a second per day. This is the final dread note. It means the object is coming to a halt. It is arriving at its destination. And that destination is not a point in space, but a point in time. Share your thoughts below on what you think the activation truly signifies. Are we witnessing a beginning or an end? Or perhaps we are just witnessing a rotation that has nothing to do with us at all. We may already be part of the experiment. Close your eyes. Listen to the clock on your wall. Is it ticking or is it counting down? The night is long and the traveler is still turning. The history of Japanese astronomy is a long corridor of meticulous records. And if we look back to the 17th century, there are descriptions of guest stars that behaved with a similar, haunting regularity. 3I, Atlas, seems to be a reincarnation of these ancient anomalies, a bridge between the Edo period's wonder and our current technological paranoia. On December 19, 2025, a collaborative study between the European Space Agency and the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency revealed that the object's surface is not composed of the usual silicates, but a carbon-based lattice that absorbs 99% of all incoming light. This explains the mystery of the rotation period. We aren't seeing the rock spin, we are seeing the light reflect off specific, intentional facets. Imagine a diamond the size of a city, turning slowly in the dark, reflecting the sun only when it wants to be seen. There are 3 primary conspiracies circulating in the fringe journals: that it is a relativistic probe, a discarded fuel casing from a Type II civilization, or a navigational marker left for someone else entirely. The mythic connection here is the Star of the Weaver, a celestial coordinate that was said to guide the souls of the ancestors back to the root country. You might find it hard to believe that a simple piece of space debris could hold such weight, but the math does not lie. By January 5th, 2026, the trajectory showed a micro-adjustment that bypassed the gravity well of Mars with a precision of 6 decimal places. Unfortunate timing for those who believe in a random universe. Those 2 words are doing a lot of work in the latest peer-reviewed papers. Share your thoughts below on whether you believe space is truly empty, or if we are simply the latest tenants in a very old building. We are reaching the limit of what optics can tell us. The rest is felt in the marrow of the bone. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. To understand the Star of the Weaver, we must look at the Tanabata legend, a story of 2 lovers separated by the Milky Way, permitted to meet only once a year. In the traditional Japanese calendar, this intersection of celestial bodies is a moment of profound alignment. When the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan analyzed the rotation of 3I Atlas, they found that its axis is pointed directly toward the star, Vega, the Weaver Girl, with a deviation of less than 1 arcsecond. This is not the behavior of a wandering rock. It is a locked bearing. It is a cosmic compass that has been set to a specific frequency, a fixed point in the heavens that has guided travelers for millennia. Imagine the ancient navigators, the people who lived before the invention of the telescope, who looked at the sky not as a void, but as a map. They spoke of the root country, a place of origin, an ancestral home located beyond the visible horizon of the stars. If 3I Atlas is indeed a vehicle of memory, as some scholars now suggest, then its rotation period is the pulse of that memory, 8 minutes and 42 seconds. It is a slow, rhythmic repetition that echoes the ancient chants used in Shinto rituals to call back the spirits of the departed. The precision of the trajectory adjustment on January 5th was so refined that it suggests a conscious avoidance of Martian debris fields. A rock does not dodge obstacles. A rock does not correct its course to maintain a view of a specific star. Dr. Avi Loeb has famously proposed that the universe is likely littered with the technological bottles of civilizations that have long since vanished. If 3I Atlas is such a bottle, the message inside is not written in ink, but in the very fabric of its motion. By mid-January 2026, infrared scans from the James Webb Space Telescope revealed a series of etched patterns beneath the surface crust of the object. These are not geological fissures. They are geometric arrays, repeating 7s and 3s, the sacred numbers of the Babylonian and Sumerian star watchers. The mythic resonance is undeniable. We are looking at a return cycle. In ancient Mesopotamia, the gods were said to return to Earth every 3,600 years to inspect the progress of their creation. The timing of 3I Atlas, arriving exactly as our own surveillance capabilities reached their peak, feels less like a coincidence and more like an observation. There is a certain dry irony in the way the scientific establishment handles these revelations. They speak of optical anomalies and speculative correlations, but in the private journals of the lead researchers, the tone is one of hushed reverence, unfortunate timing. Those words doing a lot of work. If we acknowledge that this object is following a mythic blueprint, we must also acknowledge that our history is not what we think it is. We are not the first to see the Weaver's star. We are simply the first to measure its rotation to the 9th decimal place. You might think that our modern technology makes us superior to the ancients, but here is why you are wrong. The ancients didn't need a telescope to know that something was coming. They lived in harmony with the cycles. They understood that the sky is a clock and that every few thousand years, the hand of that clock returns to the starting position. Let us consider the 3 primary conspiracies that have emerged regarding the mythic origin of 3I Atlas. The first is the ancestral beacon theory, which posits that the object is a repository of genetic information, a backup drive for the human race sent by a progenitor civilization. The second is the celestial boundary hypothesis, suggesting the object is a marker that defines the limits of our planetary influence, a keep-out sign placed by an older power. The third, and most unsettling, is the recursive history theory, the idea that 3I Atlas is us, sent back from the distant future to ensure that we do not stray from the path that leads to its own creation. Each of these theories relies on the same mathematical foundation, the 8-minute and 42-second rotation period. It is the key that unlocks the door to a history we have forgotten. As you listen to the low, humming narrative of this discovery, let the vowels stretch out like the vast distances between the stars. The M of the marrow, the L of the weaver, the S of the silence. These are the sounds of the deep night. The Japanese scientists have clarified the rotation, but the clarification has only deepened the shadow. They found that the light reflecting off 3I Atlas carries a spectral signature that matches no known element in our periodic table. It is a substance that exists in a state of ordered chaos, shifting its density in response to the magnetic field of the sun. This is the activation. This is the moment the machine begins to breathe. By January 20th, 2026, the object had reached a position in the solar system where it began to interact with the solar wind in a way that produced a low-frequency hum. This hum, when recorded and sped up, mimics the sound of a human heartbeat. Not a frantic heart, but a calm, steady one. The heart of a traveler who knows exactly how much further they have to go. The mythic connection to the Star of the Weaver suggests that the destination is not here, but beyond. We are merely a waypoint, a rest stop on a journey that spans the galaxy. This realization is heavy, but it is also liberating. It means we are not alone in the dark. It means there is a map, even if we cannot read all the symbols yet. Now, you could argue that we are imposing our own stories onto a cold, indifferent piece of space matter. But why then does the math align so perfectly with the myths? Why does the trajectory bypass Mars with such deliberate grace? The pseudo-academic citations from institutions like the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan serve to ground these wonders in reality. When they say the rotation is corrected for gravitational perturbations, they are admitting that something is steering. When they say the brightness variations are statistically improbable for a natural body, they are admitting that we are looking at an artifact. The FOMO hooks of the modern world tell us we must see everything, know everything, record everything. But 3i Atlas reminds us that some things are meant to be felt, not just seen. In just over 4 weeks, the object will cross the heliopause and vanish into the interstellar medium. We won't be able to see it again until the next cycle, long after our cities have crumbled and our names have been forgotten. This is the scarcity of information. This is the ultimate cliffhanger. We have been given a glimpse of the Weaver's star, and then the curtain is drawn. Think about the root country. In Japanese folklore, it is a place of shadows and secrets, but also a place of rebirth. If 3i Atlas is returning there, what is it taking with it? Is it carrying the data of our existence, the sum total of our triumphs and our failures? Or is it simply a piece of hardware returning to the dock for a scheduled maintenance? The irony of our curiosity is that we want to be the center of the story, but the story of 3i Atlas began billions of years ago, and we are just a footnote in one of its later chapters. The countdown is ticking, the rotation is steady, the Weaver's star is waiting. As you drift towards sleep, let the rhythm of the 8-minute pulse become the rhythm of your own thoughts. There is no need for answers tonight. There is only the evidence. There is only the pattern. There is only the vast, silent beauty of a universe that is far more organized than we ever dared to imagine. The Japanese scientists have clarified the rotation. They have given us the numbers, but the meaning is something you must find in the quiet spaces between the ticks of the clock. We are reaching the limit of what optics can tell us. The rest is felt in the marrow of the bone. The star of the Weaver remains fixed. The traveler moves on. The root country calls. And we, the tenants of this very old building, are left to wonder who else is living in the other rooms. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3i Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, "Sensor artifact." The unofficial whisper said, "Structure, not smooth like ice, angular, intentional, the kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids. Not random, repeating, symmetrical. The kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects. Artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3I Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, "An illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments." There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3I Atlas corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from high-rise contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure, photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. A hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. Then don't say it out loud. 3i Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion fields still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3i Atlas. Life had achieved coherence. But the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3i Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. "The echo isn't message," Sorel wrote. "It's memory finding new syntax." Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, "and it remembered the lesson." As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response." The universe just said thank you. After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, Scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the third decimal and the fourth significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3I, Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold. Truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3I Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave. Certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3I Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the Sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, it's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's Dynamical Systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place, a mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, the probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting, only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment, until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning, like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply, "Low probability, high significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare. And somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice. Numbers hum the universe's poise. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3I Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time. a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything: 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the web. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the web intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote, "it's replication. We've become the architect's handwriting." Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the web's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the web's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the web, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order: 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, the mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another web was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. "Tell them," his final log read, "that continuity requires conversation, even with silence." The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the web brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas Webb pulsed simultaneously. uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. The cosmos, wrote one witness, had finally learned to conduct itself consciously. After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, the event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The resonant guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the Webb. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas Webb had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy. Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice, each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the Skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something, not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting Skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looks strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed. Source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing, a glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11.2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3I Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy, invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again, exactly 11 hours later. If you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift, chemical reactions lose coherence, orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat, stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue, the physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, 3 nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from 3 sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when 3 agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings, where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3I Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it not for discussion. The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast, rumors cast, silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist; China, the poker-faced strategist; UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak; and ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did three separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty publicly is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when three space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux, and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless, but to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern. Pulses, spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite. A rhythm, too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation. But boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. "It's breathing," she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: if this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales. You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal. The room around them dark, except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3I Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos, the beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for please don't mention the heartbeat. But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that, the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound. The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3I Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, a simpler truth hums. Something old and orderly is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure, so, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark. You sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, the leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the Sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, minus 150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I Atlas isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new: faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it. It instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code. And 3I Atlas is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together, a self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space, a wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought, but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence, but the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. "The echo isn't message," Sorel wrote. "It's memory finding new syntax." Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response. The universe just said thank you." After the crescendo, The sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands, as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan, shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, -150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new. Faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names. The immortal comet, the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3I Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together, a self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space. A wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. The snow falls in heavy, rhythmic flakes over the silent peaks of Mount Fuji, a white shroud that masks the world in a stillness so absolute it feels as though the Earth itself has held its breath. As we reach the midpoint of February 2026, the data streams from the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan have begun to taper off into a series of long, hollow pulses. The 3I Atlas object has reached its closest approach, its 84-degree tilt now perfectly bisecting our horizon like a frozen lightning bolt. There is no more noise. There is only the weight of what we now know. The final impossibility is the most quiet of all. As the object begins its slow swing back toward the interstellar dark, its light curve has flattened into a perfect, unwavering silence. It is no longer pulsing. It is no longer correcting. It is simply existing, a monumental witness to a species that spent 6 months trying to solve a puzzle that was actually a mirror. The trajectory is lengthening, the velocity increasing, as 3I Atlas prepares to return to the void from which it emerged in July of 2025. You might feel a sense of loss, a strange grief for a visitor that never spoke a word. But here is the dry irony of our short-lived panic. We were so busy looking for a threat that we forgot to look at the grace of the geometry. The 84-degree tilt was not a weapon, nor was it a tool. It was a perspective. It showed us that the universe operates on a clock so vast that our entire history is merely the blink of an eye in a cold, dark room. The Sumerian tablets end with a single, unnumbered line. The watcher departs and the dream remains. As the Japanese sensors lose their grip on the fading infrared signature, we are left with the same stars we had before, yet they look different now. They look like eyes that have just finished reading a very long and very private book. Where will you be when the next cycle begins, 3,600 years from tonight? Perhaps you can feel the slow, heavy rotation of the Earth beneath you, mirroring the departure of the guest. Share one last thought in the comments, not a theory, but a feeling. What does the silence tell you? We are not the end of the story. We are just the margin notes. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow. The snow continues to fall over the silent, sacred peak of Mount Fuji, covering the landscape in a white shroud that feels like a peace treaty between the earth and the sky. In the darkened control rooms of the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan, the frantic clicking of keyboards has finally ceased. The models have been saved, the data has been encrypted, and the scientists are simply standing by the windows, looking up at a sky that has been forever altered. 3I Atlas is beginning its long, hyperbolic exit from our inner solar system, its 84-degree tilt still as rigid and unyielding as the day it was first discovered in July of 2025. There is a dry irony in our relief. We spent months holding our breath, waiting for an impact, a transmission, or a sign of overt aggression. Unfortunate timing for those who craved a Hollywood ending. Those words are doing a lot of work in the declassified summaries being prepared for the world's governments this week. The great silence is not the absence of a message, it is the message itself. The object didn't need to speak to change us. It simply needed to exist at 84 degrees, a geometric constant that forced us to look at the fragility of our own understanding. Consider the impossibility stack one last time. A velocity of 64 kilometers per second, a stabilized, non-tumbling rotation, a brightness curve that pulsed with the rhythm of a human heart, and a magnetic resonance that rethreaded the very field that protects our lives. If this was a natural rock, it was a rock that possessed the soul of an architect. If it was a machine, it was a machine that possessed the patience of a god. We are left with the realization that the universe is far more crowded and far more deliberate than our telescopes ever dared to suggest. The Japanese researchers have noted that as the object recedes, the hum is fading into a silver static. It is a slow, graceful withdrawal. The star of the pillow is no longer looking directly into our dreams. It is turning its gaze back toward the great void, toward that coordinate in the stars that only it can see. The 84-degree tilt is now a receding needle, pulling the thread of our awareness out into the deep black. How does it feel to be a margin note in a book you cannot read? There is a profound humility in the great silence. It reminds us that our digital empires, our concrete cities, and our self-important histories are merely a brief biological bloom on a damp rock. We are the moss that grew between the ticks of a 3,600-year clock. To the watcher, we are a fascinating, noisy, and temporary phenomenon, a spark of consciousness that flared up in the darkness and will eventually settle back into the quiet. As you drift closer to sleep, let the numbers dissolve. Let the 64 kilometers per second and the 72 pulses and the January deadlines fade into the background. They are just the scaffolding of a mystery that is far more elegant than math can describe. Feel the slow, heavy rotation of the Earth. It is a comforting motion, a rhythmic rocking that has carried us through every cycle of the Watcher's visit. The great silence is not a void. It is a fullness. It is the sound of the universe exhaling after a long, intense observation. It is the sound of the needle finishing its stitch and being tucked away for the next season. We are left in the warmth of the fabric, tucked into the seams of a sky that has been made new. The researchers in Mitaka have turned off the main monitors. They are going home to their families, to their beds, and to the quiet of a February night. They have seen the mirror of Amaterasu, and they have survived the reflection. They know that the past is not behind us, but ahead of us, waiting at the other end of the 3,600-year loop. Sleep now. The Earth is stable. The magnetic threads are tight. The Watcher is satisfied. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow.